Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Insights into what the immediate future holds for former unified super featherweight champion Mikaela Mayer. To be honest, I know now that I haven't been at my best. I didn't think that the weight was a problem, but Bum Bum was right. I was drained. In my head, I was just a fighter in a hard training camp, hustling. But the way I feel now at my new weight proves I was struggling. No mas.
Which I queried.
140 or 147? Because it sounds to me like Mikaela's moving up, way up. Mikaela Mayer herself responded by saying 140, stay busy fight this year, and then 147 come January. Now, who could the former unified super featherweight champion be targeting all the way up there at welterweight? Natasha Jonas, the name of Natasha Jonas, almost immediately comes to mind. She recently became a champion there.
Right.
So Mikaela's saying that she's going to have a keep busy fight at 140 en route to 147. Thus, whoever she fights at 140, it's not going to be a high-profile opponent, a high-profile name. The most high-profile names anywhere at or around that weight are about to fight each other for a second time in the fall. Katie Taylor and Chantel Kamran, that division's undisputed champion. So I don't expect to see Mikaela face a familiar name or a high-profile opponent. It's all about what she does once she gets to welterweight. It sounds a lot to me like she plans on squaring off against Natasha Jonas. There is also the winner of McCaskill versus Ryan over there on the Matchroom side of things. Network relationship already exists between Top Rank and Sky Sports, where Natasha Jonas fights, to where they could do that fight amongst themselves.
It's more realistic.
Having caught wind of Mikaela Mayer's ascent all the way up there to welterweight, the current undisputed super featherweight champion, her old buddy, Alicia Baumgartner, responded by saying, drained and nowhere near the level I possess. Have fun at 147, to which Mikaela Mayer responded, nowhere near, split decision. Bitch, if you were so confident, you would have taken the rematch along with the biggest payday of your life. Have fun fighting for pennies, dumbass.
Why are you mad?
There's no love lost between those two, though it doesn't look like we're on the eve of a second fight between them. We know that immediately after the first fight, there were some that felt Mikaela won, while others felt the decision was just and Alicia had done enough. Mikaela wanted an immediate rematch, but at that time, Alicia wanted to pursue the final puzzle piece, the missing belt, to complete the set.
To become undisputed.
So there was no immediate rematch. Mikaela Mayer, she didn't want to wait around. She decided to move up to 135, and having not spent much time there, she is now deciding to move up to 140, then 147. Alas, it doesn't look like we're on the eve of a second fight.
How will Mikaela Mayer fare at 147? Being honest with you, given her physical dimensions, that she was always a tall drink of water, tall drink of boxing.
I happen to think she can do all right up there. It's a wonder that she made 130 pounds for as long as she did, because she really does have generous physical dimensions for a super featherweight, long and limber.
She'll do all right.
Because of her physical dimensions, and because whether you're talking about it super featherweight, lightweight, wherever Mikaela has campaigned so far, she was never a fighter that was relying on strength of arms to get the job done. Mikaela Mayer's bread and butter really is her boxing more than her brawling. Not saying that she can't brawl. We saw in the Maiva Hamadouche fight that she can. Up there at 147, given her boxing brain, I think she can do all right.
And if you need an example of this, think about Mikaela's contemporaries, Natasha Jonas, Terry Harper. They used to campaign at super featherweight. They moved all the way up there to junior middle. Won titles there.
They both respectively did all right for themselves and won belts at 154, so I don't think it's a stretch to say that Mikaela can win a belt at 147. And that would bring Mikaela closer to a Jonas fight and closer to a Harper fight, lest we forget. Before it became about Mikaela and Alicia, it was about Mikaela and Terry. Terry happens to hold the title just north of 147 at 154.
She's going to be fighting Cecilia Breaker soon.
In defense of her own WBA title and the newly vacated WBO, the chance for Terry to become a unified champion.
She's already been a champion at two weights.
Mikaela Mayer! She looks to do the same. She's looking to become a two-division champion. Moving up to 140 and 147 brings Mikaela Mayer closer to the names, the big names at or around those weights. You're talking about Jessica McCaskill, Sandy Ryan, Terry Harper, who I just mentioned, Natasha Jonas.
It's a smart move.
So it does effectively put a Baumgartner rematch on the back burner, a potential Katie Taylor fight as well. Not that I thought Michaela was going to be able to get Katie in the ring. I don't.
Michaela doesn't want to wait around. I really don't blame her. She's got to go where the action is, where the opportunities are. And right now, that's really not 130 or 135.
She's a smart cookie. And welterweight division, former champion turned analyst and trainer Antonio Tarver rips Derek James for Spence's performance against Terrence Crawford.
Antonio, like many of you, like me, he picked Terrence Crawford to win the fight.
Now vindicated for those assertions, he is laying the blame at the feet of two-time Trainer of the Year Derek James, saying they're crowning these guys Trainer of the Year. Come on, man. This man wasn't prepared for no Terrence Crawford. The trainer's got to take some flack for that. It's his responsibility to have his fighter ready. No head movement, no feints. Didn't have his hands up. Feet everywhere. Where's the lessons?
There's more at work here than meets the eye. And Terrence Crawford, being the generational talent that he is, the pound-for-pound fighter, some of us already knew that.
Some of us knew that Crawford was going to beat this guy. So what you then have to ask yourself is, all the work that Derek James did with Errol, the work he's doing with Frank Martin, and what he's set to do with Ryan Garcia, with Anthony Joshua, is that all automatically undone because one of his fighters suffered a loss? As a fighter, you're going to suffer losses, and as a trainer, it's going to happen.
I understand what Antonio is saying, that if Derek James is good enough to receive the plaudits when his fighters win, then surely he should receive some blame when his fighters lose. That Errol looked a lot like a deer in the headlights opposite the ring Terrence Crawford.
No defense, he couldn't get away from the jab. The jab was what beat him all night. You can't always be so offensively minded in a fight. In my previous video, we talked about how Derek James's philosophy seems to be that today's era of boxing is predicated mostly on physicalities
Instead of strategies.
instead of technique and tactics. Derek James's philosophy seems to be that today's boxer relies more on athleticism than anything else. In many ways, that philosophy is what costed Errol Spence Jr. so much. The question is, opposite the ring Terrence Crawford,
When is that not the case? He's an unbeaten fighter. He's been an unbeaten fighter in 3 divisions. It's not like somebody's figured him out yet.
Freddie Roach's boy, Victor Pistol, he took on Terrence Crawford years ago. I don't remember people laying into Freddie Roach the way some are now laying into Derek James. Now maybe it's because Derek was quite dismissive of Terrence.
He was.
Told Terrence's mother not to bring her dance shoes out for the 29th. He relegated Terrence Crawford's ambidextrous switch hitting to being a lot of nonsense. He was quite vocal and quite dismissive, and now what he's getting are his comeuppance. That's one way to look at it.
But I don't think that makes him a bad trainer, losing one fight to a pound-for-pound fighter in his own right. I don't think that makes Derek a bad trainer, that now what we've got to do is throw the whole trainer away.
I don't think he's a bad trainer. I just think he has a flawed way of looking at things, a flawed philosophy, though most people do. Nobody's perfect.
So you do have to wonder now, will Ryan be better with Derek James? Will Anthony Joshua be better with Derek James?
I mean, Errol Spence Jr., Jermel Charlo, Frank Martin, they have had a lot of success with Derek James in their corner. They have. And his most recent pupils come in the form of Anthony Joshua and Ryan Garcia. Should they be worried?
Depends. For years now, people have been asking Anthony to stop being this cerebral, tentative, and timid fighter and go back to being the bruiser, the brawler, boxer that he used to be, the strong finisher. A guy like Derek might actually be able to bring that out of Anthony.
You ask yourself, well, what if he ends up like Errol Spence Jr.? I mean, abiding by Derek James's philosophy, won't that yield the same result that we saw in the Spence versus Crawford fight? And that really depends. Is there a Terrence Crawford at heavyweight that Anthony's about to fight?
Just saying, one loss don't make Derek a piece of trash.
Not jumping to conclusions is all I'm saying. And if Ryan Garcia is ready to buckle down and work hard, now that he's got Derek James in his corner, as opposed to Joe Goosen, as opposed to Eddie Reynoso, if he adheres to Derek's instructions better than he was adhering to theirs, that's an improvement unto itself, because Ryan is not the finished product anyway.
So no, I don't think Derek is just a piece of trash because Errol lost.
Perception was the problem here, that Derek and Errol plan of action for Terrence Crawford, if you even want to call that a plan, relied on the assumption that Errol would be too big and too strong for Terrence.
He wasn't.
They found out he wasn't.
That's where they fucked up at.
Now, looking back, Spence says that Terrence is a strong dude. He found out the hard way here on this channel. I've been telling you that for 5 fucking years.
Doesn't make Derek a bad trainer or Errol a bad fighter.
Their philosophy is too simple, and Errol's approach to a fight is too basic. Too basic for Terrence Crawford. Perhaps not most other fighters, most other welterweights or junior middleweights, but for Terrence, it's too easy to read.
I got a feel for his power probably like in the first or second round, said a despondent Spence. He's a strong dude. The taste of defeat is a new feeling for Spence. Throughout his near-decade-long career, he's dominated the competition. Now, he's trying to wrap his head around his lopsided defeat.
There goes perception again. In this instance, the author of this article's perception, saying that now Errol has to wrap his mind around his lopsided defeat. Underneath it all, Errol knew, Derek too, that Terrence is a bigger threat to them than anybody they've fought so far, anybody they dominated. Why do you think they saved him for last?
You're saying that he has to wrap his head around that now. I think he wrapped his head around that a long time ago, and that's why this fight took so long to make.
Everybody at the top level has some type of power, but I think because my timing was off, he was catching me in between the shots. Now, I happen to think Errol Spence Jr.'s timing being off has everything to do with the year-long layoff in between the Ugas fight and the Crawford fight. The problem is, that's a self-inflicted wound. Errol Spence Jr., in his own words, has stated on many occasions he does not believe in tune-up fights, in between fights.
That backfired.
Terrence Crawford says Spence didn't hit as hard as everyone said he did.
I could have told you that.
In fact, I did tell you that for the last 5 years. Some will say that Errol Spence Jr. staying at welterweight so long may have weakened him, or that he's not the same fighter that he was before the car accident. I've been saying Spence's power is overrated since before the car accident.
Oh, yeah.
Can be a good fighter, good solid fighter, and an overrated fighter at the same time. Two things can be true at the same time. Errol's not a bad fighter. He's just not on the level of Terrence Crawford. And one glaring example was the Mikey Garcia fight. The fight that took place 2 fights before he got into that car accident. He couldn't drop Mikey, he couldn't stop Mikey.
How many times did you hear me bring that up?
Errol Spence Jr. landed over 300 punches on a chubby lightweight with no prior experience at welterweight, and I was not impressed with what I saw. I felt like Mikey Garcia, if Errol was every inch...
He was every bit the wrecking machine he's made out to be. There's no way Mikey Garcia should have been able to go the distance with him. I don't think for a second that same Mikey Garcia would have went 12 with Terrence Crawford.
For some, that was a signature performance, but for me, that was an indictment. An indictment against Errol Spence Jr. and Errol Spence Jr.'s power, that he's really not the puncher they're making him out to be. Because if he were, there's no way Mikey hears the final bell, even if he is shelling up behind a high guard.
He's still a fat lightweight who's never fought at 147.
How long did you see people blowing smoke up each other's asses about that fight? I knew he was much slower than me, and I was stronger than him, and he didn't hit as hard as everybody said he did.
Before you go saying that, well, he stayed at welter too long, and the car accident weakened him.
Most of the people saying that stuff are people that actually picked Errol Spence Jr. to win, so that after he loses...
No, now he stayed there too long.
You weren't saying that when he fought Danny, you weren't saying that when he fought Ugas, but I was saying when he fought Mikey, this guy's power is overrated. He's not as big a puncher as they say he is. That doesn't mean he's pillow-fisted.
But his power's overrated.
Some are already calling for Errol's retirement. Stephen A. Smith did, but Eimantas Stanionis isn't. Eimantas Stanionis does not believe Errol Spence should retire.
What he does next is pivotal towards the second phase of his career, technically the third.
Who he was before the car accident, who people thought he was afterwards, and who he is now that he suffered his first professional loss. Regardless of those believing that Spence should hang up his gloves and focus on other things, Eimantas Stanionis is of the belief that all of this retirement talk is nonsense. No, said Stanionis, theboxingscene.com, when asked if retirement makes sense for Spence. Look, everybody wants big fights. One guy gets beat up and now he has to retire? It's crazy.
Not really.
It was in December of 2020, 2 years ago, that Errol Spence Jr. in his own words said that he could have retired immediately after the car accident and that he's here for a good time but not a long one.
What do you think he meant by that? Because that was 2 years ago. More than 2 years later, after having suffered a lopsided loss the way that he did, it's not because he lost that people think he should retire. It's because another fight with Terence Crawford could retire him.
I would interpret Errol Spence activating that rematch clause and running it back with Terence for a second time at 154 as Errol effectively cashing out. You've heard me say it several times already. The second fight at 154, it wouldn't go any differently than the first one did. And if that checks out and Errol loses again in the same fashion that he just did, that would herald his retirement. You can't take 2 beatings like that in succession.
Sometimes all it takes is one to leave you permanently damaged. 2?
Stanionis continued. Of course he's been through a lot. The car crash, the retina, but he came back from all of this. So why should he retire? I don't think so. And I myself think, if it is Errol's intention to continue his boxing career a while longer, then a Terence Crawford rematch does not behoove him. That should not be part of the plan. The fight was so lopsided, there really is no need for a second fight, aside from a few hurt fanboys and hurt egos, people that got it wrong. For Errol himself and the longevity of his career, running it back with Terence shouldn't be part of the plan. Now fighting Brian Mendoza for a WBC interim title, or the full one, if it becomes available, that makes more sense to me.
Errol may have had generous physical dimensions for a welterweight, but at junior middle, he'll be on the smaller end of the spectrum. There are some big kids up there. What benefits and advantages Errol might have had from being on the bigger end of the spectrum as a welterweight, he may not have those same advantages and that same power as a junior middle.
Errol's approach is too simple. What he usually does is step into his jab and bulldoze guys mid-range to inside through his physicality. But how physical can he be with those junior middles?
Question. My honest opinion is that neither Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. have that much time left and that much more to give the sport of boxing.
Though it's more alarming with Errol because he is 1 or 2 years younger than Terence Crawford and certainly not as accomplished a fighter.
People expected more.
More from him. I think if he plays his cards right, navigates carefully, he can at minimum become a 2-division champion. I think he can do that.
Before calling it a career or before trying to fight Terence Crawford for a second time, I think he can do that.
If you were to try to fight him straight away, I reiterate, all that would herald is Errol cashing out and his potential retirement thereafter.